Welcome to another episode of Altitude Advantage. I'm your host and team reporter, Elisa Hernandez. Across the table, we have our lead writer on DenverBroncos.com, Aric DiLalla. And we are celebrating Dub Day here in the Broncos podcast studio as the Broncos secured the win in Week 18. The regular season is now behind us, and it is off to the playoffs. The Broncos have clinched the number one seed in the AFC, which means they retain home field advantage throughout the playoffs up until Super Bowl 60. They only need to win 2 games here at home to advance to the big dance. And it's one of those accomplishments that a lot of the guys were very proud about. They obviously knocked off 2 of the 3 goals that head coach Sean Payton has laid out. But how excited are you for what this team has accomplished, especially how we started in Week 1, trying to figure out what exactly this season was going to look like?
Yeah, I think that this is big picture, several years worth of work, right? And that was spoken about a little bit last night, both at the podium and in the locker room. And really, you could date all the way back to 2015 when the Broncos last won the Super Bowl and then try to run it back in 2016. And there's some years there where things obviously don't go the way you want them to, have that long playoff drought. It's a tough situation, particularly in 2022. Head coach Sean Payton arrives, and it becomes about building something back up. And let's be clear, like externally, there are a lot of questions in 2023 about, can this be done? Will the Broncos be able to do this? What is their ceiling? And that first year, obviously the Broncos don't make the playoffs, but I think something that was really clear to me was that they were a well-coached football team, and they did things the way that you need to do to win football games. And in particular, one of the turning points that year, obviously, was the loss in Miami. That was a devastating loss, a 70-20 defeat, something that the Broncos guaranteed would never happen again. And from there, you take a step forward, and you end up 8-9, and then you go into the offseason, and you make a lot of changes, and you part ways with some veteran players, some guys that had either been high-priced acquisitions or had been here for a long time, and change was difficult from that perspective. But you saw signs that year. There was kind of that 5-game winning streak in the middle of the year that showed this is what it could be like. Then you go into 2024, right, and you start 0-2 with Bo Nix, and it's the thought is maybe, hey, is this going to be a developmental season with Bo? And instead you start to rattle off wins. You get to a turning point in the season in Kansas City. You lose with that blocked field goal at the buzzer. And instead of folding, this team goes on a run. And then even when there were tough moments against the Chargers or the Bengals, the Broncos respond and they make it to the postseason. And you have that moment in Buffalo where Bo Nix hits Troy Franklin for the deep touchdown. And it feels for a moment like you can win that football game. And it's close until the end of the third quarter when it gets out of hand a little bit. And then you go into this year, right? And you load up again with Talanoa Hufanga and Dre Greenlaw and Evan Ingram, J.K. Dobbins. You add some more pieces through the draft. You got a young running back in R.J. Harvey who's obviously had a big impact. And now you're not just talking about playoffs. You're talking about, can we win the Super Bowl? And Sean Payton said many times, you've got to be comfortable having that conversation. And then we get to where you said Week 1 where, okay, you've had all these conversations. You've talked about this all training camp. You've now had the expectations of being one of these teams that can go from playoff team to true contender. And then you start 1-2, right? And we're thinking, okay, is the division out of reach already with the Chargers at 3-0? And you respond by winning 11 straight games. And some of those games, the Eagles win, the comeback over the Giants, the win over Kansas City at home, the kind of statement win over the Packers here. It all is part of this journey, and then you close out against 2 division opponents. And as Sean Payton said last night, you can't choose when you play these teams, and the Broncos took advantage of their opportunity in facing a couple of backup quarterbacks and got the job done. And now you sit here as the 1 seed with, like you said, an opportunity to play 2 home games to get to the Super Bowl. And I think it is about this season and this team and what they've accomplished, but also for me, having been here for the duration of this stretch, right? It's also about, hey, how far this team has come in a relatively short period of time. And you'll see it talked about this week, the dead cap that the Broncos had last year, the dead cap that the Broncos still have. I mean, it was a big conversation topic last year about all the dead cap money that the Broncos had as they moved on from Russell Wilson. That is still there. They're still carrying a significant amount of that this year. And so to be able to be the number 1 seed and have their depth show out. I mean, one of the things, at least I was saying to somebody, Sean Payton has done a remarkable job with this team, but he is not the favorite right now to be coach of the year. Bo Nix is not the favorite to be MVP. You don't see as many like personnel executive of the year odds, but I haven't heard that George Payton is in that conversation. I think you could argue all 3 guys deserve to be in that conversation. Assistant of the year is Vance Joseph a guy who could get that? Quite possibly, but also it's not like there's a ton of buzz for that. And so my question is, okay, well then the Broncos are 14-3, so somebody deserves this credit. And I think the truth is that they all do, and that they've all contributed in the ways that they need to. And I think you could say that George Payton, Sean Payton, Vance Joseph, Bo Nix, like they're all deserving of, you could argue that any of those guys deserves the awards. Specifically, Sean Payton and George Payton and Vance Joseph. I think the touchdown numbers for Bo, maybe not there in the same way, but it's this collective, right? And it's the depth that they've built on this team. And so when you have that, you're able to accomplish this 14-3 record, put yourself in position to go on a playoff run. But it's about more than just this team. It's about how far they've come. And that's where, like, people are going to be talking about the offense this week and what things look like as you gear up for the playoffs. And as Bo Nix said last night, people are still going to be picking against us in the first round of the playoffs. But let's recognize where this team was 3 years ago and how far they've come from that. That in and of itself, and I think I saw our friend Nick Kosmiter tweet something similar. It was like, there's plenty of time to talk about the playoffs, and we're going to do it today, but let's also recognize the incredible element of this accomplishment, because it kind of seemed unfathomable a couple years ago that you could accomplish this and get the number 1 seed based on where this team was as recently as 3 years ago. And it's a commitment from ownership, the Walton Penner family ownership group. It's George Payton solidifying this roster. It's Sean Payton coaching this team. It's Bo Nix coming in at quarterback. It's all those guys, Cortland Sutton, Garrett Bowles, who have stuck around. It's the new guys in Hufanga, Ingram, Greenlaw have come in, McGlinchey, like all these guys since Sean Payton got here. It is the collective, and you've kind of got a team right now that is, it's great as a sum of its parts. And sometimes you talk about a team not being as good as a sum of its parts. This team makes each other better, and now has a chance to do something special.
You bring up Cortland Sutton, who yesterday in the locker room, when they asked him, what does it mean to get that number 1 seed? He kind of just took a breath and was like, it's a blessing. And he's like, I went around to everyone in the locker room and told them that this is a blessing, because not every day you get the number 1 seed. It's not every day you make it to the playoffs. And he mentioned, like, 6 years of my career, this was the last game of the year. And I was getting ready for, the off season. And now we have a chance to not only be in the playoffs, but have the number 1 seed, have home field advantage. And he stressed the importance of it being at Empower Field at Mile High, and just the proud accomplishment that what that means. And to your point, it's because all these guys have bought in, whether the guys that have been here for years, the guys that got here when things weren't as great, to the guys that got here and saw instant success. I mean, the collective of all those guys playing together, I think, is huge. And I think they asked Talanoa Hufanga about, like, oh, well, you didn't really get to celebrate being AFC West champions. Are you going to take time to celebrate this? And he laughed, and he was like, no, of course. He's like, this is a big deal. He's like, but we're focused on the bigger picture, because they know that they're doubted in the first round of the playoffs, because they know that they're not seen as like this force to be reckoned with. But the goalpost continues to get moved back, and the Broncos have just done everything possible to take care of business in the way that they take care of business. And if you look across the league at some of the teams that lost the opportunity to get the number 1 seed, lost the opportunity to be in certain positions, I don't think that they would say, oh, I wish that we wouldn't have won, but it would have been worth it if it was 9-3. They just want the win at the end of the day. And that's exactly what the message was in the locker room from all the guys, where it's like, it doesn't matter what the score looks like. We understand that we want to get touchdowns and things like that, but the win is more important, because that's going to set us up to get the biggest win of all, and that's at Super Bowl 60.
Yeah, this team has won in a lot of different ways and finds ways to win. And I don't think there's any like illusion about what awaits you in the playoffs. It's going to be difficult. It's supposed to be difficult. It's supposed to be hard to win a Super Bowl. And no matter who comes in here in a couple of weeks, it's going to be a difficult game. And, you know, it could be the Steelers, it could be the Texans, it could be the Bills, it could be the Chargers. Each of those teams presents a different matchup and imposes a different problem. I mean, the Steelers have a Hall of Fame quarterback, right? And a number one receiver in DK Metcalf, who will be back, and a couple of defensive players in TJ Watt, Cam Hayward, who are as good as anybody in the league. You look at Houston and the way their defense obviously is as good as there is in the league. And you have Will Anderson and Danielle Hunter, and you have CJ Stroud, who's playing at a high level. The Bills, obviously, they could get some defensive guys back, but James Cook, terrific running back, and Josh Allen is as good as any quarterback in the league, if not the best. And then you look at the Chargers, and obviously this is a team that yesterday played you tight, even with, you know, half of their defensive starters out and plays really good red zone defense. And Herbert, I think yesterday you saw what he means to that team, and he can make a number of throws. And the Broncos against Herbert, since Jim Harbaugh took over as head coach, they haven't beaten that team. And so each team is going to pose a problem, and that's without even getting to, hey, do you meet Jacksonville for a rematch later? Do you meet New England? But it's supposed to be hard. And while the Broncos probably will be, and Bo Nix, like I said this after the game, that, hey, we might be overdogs now, but they're still going to pick against us and tell you why we're going to lose in the divisional round. And that feels like it'll probably be the case. You know, you'll get a team coming in here. Maybe it's the Bills. Maybe it's the Texans. Who knows who it ends up? Maybe it's the Chargers, Steelers. You'll hear nationally that, oh, this is a Broncos team that can get picked off. Yeah. And yet all the Broncos have done this year is continue to win close games against some of these playoff teams. They've earned wins. And there's a belief in this group that they'll find a way. And like you said, it doesn't have to be pretty. It doesn't have to be perfect. I do think yesterday there was probably an element of, and Sean Payton didn't say this necessarily, but of, can you win without revealing everything that you want to do in the postseason in a potential rematch against the Chargers? And there's a way to win each game. And yesterday it was finding a way to do enough to knock off the Chargers and get that number one seed. And so, yeah, guys should be excited, and guys should feel like they've got a great chance to do something special, because they do. And yes, the Texans, for example, they're on a 9-game win streak, I believe. They're on a roll. The Broncos are the last team to beat them. They pulled their starters at halftime, but they were locked in a battle at halftime. It was 23-17 at halftime, and the Texans trailed late in that game. And you look at the Bills, they've been terrific at times, and at other times they've probably wanted to play better. Same with the Steelers. And so there is this, and obviously if you're a Broncos fan, your microscope is going to be on the Broncos. You're going to pay more attention to them than other teams. But I do think there's a little bit of, and we've talked about this a lot, of like, because the Broncos keep winning close games, they're like accused of not being at the level that you would want a 14-3 team to be. And yet my response to that always is, would you rather them lose the games and be 10-7, right? And then it's like, then you're talking about them as, oh, they can't close out close games, right? And that's the problem with them. And so it's a no-win situation for the Broncos from a perspective or perception standpoint, and yet it is a win scenario in that you have found ways to win, and you do have 2 home games now standing between you and Super Bowl 60. And Elisa, we know, like, yes, it's a great opportunity, and yet you want to take advantage of it, because you never know when you could get this opportunity again.
Yeah, after the game, Alex Singleton talked about the message that head coach Sean Payton gave to the team. And not only does this team get home field advantage throughout the playoffs, but they get that first round bye week. And the message was recover, get your bodies right, and understand that this team won 14 games for a reason. And this is the time to not realize like who are playing just yet, because you have to wait to see who the matchup is going to be. But for this week, rest up, get as healthy as you can. And a lot of the guys talked about the fact that it's a long season, and now it's a new season, and it comes down to 3 hours. And what can you do in those 3 hours? And taking advantage of this week is a big deal. And Cortland Sutton talked about it too, about potentially, talking to the guys to come in and work out and stay in constant communication with each other. Jaquan McMillan talked about the fact that this team is special because they hang out with each other outside of the building, and they're constantly texting and finding ways to make each other better because they understand that now it does come down to 3 hours. And so what are you going to do in this week to not take it for granted, but take advantage of it, get your body right, get your mind right, rest up. A lot of the guys joked about like, man, I don't want to do anything for at least a day or two, just want to kick my feet up. And it's like, you earned that. You deserve that. And this is why this accomplishment is so big, because head coach Sean Payton knows what it takes to win a Super Bowl. And a lot of the guys mentioned it when he said that they had what it took to get there. The guys bought into that because they know that he's not going to say that just to say that. He's not going to say that just because it sounds nice or because he wants the media to think that. He's saying that because he believes it. And that's why those goals were laid out the way that they were. And so when you look at what this team is able to do and just getting healthy, this bye week is a huge deal. The guys talked about that. And again, the other side that I'm going to circle back to is just Broncos country. They mentioned in multiple scrums during post game of just how important it was. Adam Troutman said that at some point he felt like his head was hurting because it was so loud, but that's exactly what he wants. Riley Moss was very adamant, saying like they don't know how much they help us. We say it, but like we really mean it. J-Mac mentioned that he just kind of looked at the camera. He said, "We just want you to know, Broncos country, we love you. Keep doing what you're doing. Keep showing up for us, and we'll keep showing up for you." I mean, the impact of that and pulling teams here to Denver now is going to be huge. It's going to be a huge advantage, and that's exactly what the Broncos set out to do from week one by making this the hardest place to play and securing home field and playing well at home. And the Broncos finished 8-1 at home this year.
Yeah, and I think even more so than a normal year, it's important to have that home field advantage. One, because I do think these are going to be, and not that postseason games aren't always, but like these are going to be close games. These are going to be tough games. If you have say the Chargers come here, the Texans come here, the Bills or Steelers or whoever it is, you could see it, especially the way the Broncos have played a lot of games this year. You could see it being a one-score game late, right? And like, can the noise from the crowd power you to a key takeaway? Like, can you make it difficult for the quarterback and the offense to hear the play call in the huddle so that there's a little miscommunication and boom, it leads to a turnover, it leads to a key sack? Does the altitude have an impact? We'll see if it gets cold at some point, but like, does that play a role if you're playing certain teams here at Empower Field at Mile High? Like, that matters. And they say, when they set lines, like home field advantage is typically worth around 3 points. And so if you're playing a game against a team that is going to be a one-possession game, if you can get that 3-point edge because of the home field advantage, that's critical. And maybe it's, maybe it gives Nick Bonito and Jonathan Cooper a split-second head start on getting off the line of scrimmage. Maybe it makes things a little bit easier for Bo Nix and Cortland Sutton if they're checking a play at the line of scrimmage to make sure they're on the same page that could lead to a big completion. And I think that this team has proven it can go on the road in tough environments and play, but certainly it is easier at home. There is no doubt about that. And that's just a little bit of an edge that quite frankly, that's why it's so important to get the number one seed. So that's part of it. The rest you mentioned, I also think it's more than the rest. It's also that, knock on wood, but like you're not expecting anyone's going to get hurt this weekend, right? And so as the Jaguars and Bills face off, as the Chargers and Patriots play in what I'm sure will be a physical football game, as the Steelers and Texans play in what I know will be a physical football team based on the way those two teams play, like they're battling it out, grinding it out while you're fresh for a week. And that does mean that the second the game starts in the divisional round, you have to be ready to go. You can't have any of that rust from having the bye week against a team as quality as whoever comes in here. But maybe some guys get banged up. Like, that's possible, and that's one of the things you've earned is that you get to heal while other teams go out and play a game. And that's kind of the other element of this, and what Sean Payton has called the most important, to some degree, element of this is you get to skip one of these games, right? The Jaguars and Bills, that's an incredible game. I cannot wait to watch that. Like, when you look at some of these, Patriots Chargers, that has a chance to be an incredible game. It's Sunday Night Football. Like, I could see that being a down-to-the-wire game, a back-and-forth game. I could
It'll
see
be fun to just watch and know that it doesn't affect us at all.
I could see Bills-Jaguars being 40-38. Like, that could be an incredible game. And those are quality teams that you're going to have to see later in the postseason. You get to skip one of these. While every other team in the AFC is going to have to win 3 games to get to the Super Bowl, you only have to win 2. Like, it's a reduction there in terms of what you have to accomplish. And so while, one of the Jaguars and Bills, who I think are both good enough teams to get to the Super Bowl, I do. Like, they're going to be a quality test for the Broncos. One of those teams will be gone and have their season done after this weekend. The Chargers and Patriots, I think both of those teams are good enough to make, the Chargers, obviously, I think they're good enough to make the divisional round and play the Broncos. I think the Patriots are good enough to meet the Broncos in the AFC Championship. One of those teams' seasons is done. The Texans have been the hottest team in the AFC. If they lose to Pittsburgh, they're done. The Steelers, they haven't had maybe the consistency as some of these other teams, but they've shown in big moments they can show up and they could be done. And so the best thing about this is the Broncos season will not be done this weekend. And you get to make the Final Four in the AFC just by the virtue of having done what you did in the regular season. And so that's what matters so much. And normally I was reading this Athletic article by Mike Sando about playoff distribution odds of who's likely to make the Super Bowl. And in the AFC, the last 2 years, the top 2 teams combined for a 66% chance to make the Super Bowl and 71% chance in 2023. So last year, for example, the Chiefs entered the postseason with a 45% chance of making the Super Bowl, and the Bills had a 21%. This year, the Broncos lead all AFC teams, and this is according to The Athletic. Broncos lead all AFC teams in in Super Bowl percentage chance at 33.3, and the Patriots are next at 18.3. That's 51% of the combined odds. So that's 15% lower than a year ago. And what that means is it's a more wide open AFC. The Texans have a 14.4% chance. The Jags have a 13.6% chance. The Bills have a 12.5% chance. And so there's really, if you look at it, 5 teams that, according to this projection, have at least a 10% chance to make the Super Bowl from the AFC. It's an open race. And yet in my opinion, when you have an open race like this, an AFC playoff field where anybody could get hot and go on a run, to have the advantage of playing those games at home, to have the advantage of skipping around, to have the advantage to rest up and heal, that's a huge benefit for the Denver Broncos, and it's a reason why their chances are better than anybody else's, according to the Athletics playoff simulator, is because they have that edge of the number 1 seed, and still got to go out there and do it. But certainly in an open AFC playoff field with a lot of competitive teams and a lot of worthy teams, and the Broncos could see a couple of them, it's nice to be in the Broncos' position. And as Bo Nick said, there's no better position to be in.
Yeah, and that's exactly why the Broncos held that goal so close and why it was so important. And I think you had mentioned it on the podcast after they won the AFC West, where they said, I think it was Adam Troutman that mentioned, we've been the number 1 seed for a few weeks now. So now it's on us to finish off that way because we're in control of that. And it didn't matter that New England won in Week 18. It didn't matter that the Jaguars won in Week 18 because the Broncos were in a position that as long as they continue to do what they were doing and everyone does their job in the way they need to do, they're going to finish where they need to finish. And that's exactly what happened. And so I know head coach Sean Payton mentioned how they're going to treat the bye week because it is different for fans that don't know. This bye week is a little different than the one that is done during the season. A lot of the guys were very adamant, there's no vacation, there's no leaving town, there's none of that. Head coach Sean Payton did mention that there will be a break and they'll come back for some practices prior to the weekend. And obviously the weight rooms will be open and film study and things like that. But how do you see this team really kind of staying focused as they watch these wild card games and get ready for the divisional round?
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt in my mind that these guys are going to stay locked in. I think they know what's in front of them. I keep going back to what Dan Campbell said a couple years ago after the Lions lost in San Francisco. They had a late lead, and he said, I told my guys, this could be our best chance. This could be the closest we get. And it's heartbreaking in some degree, like to some degree, to some level, because it's true. And the parity in the NFL where you have all these teams each year go worst to first. You have all these different playoff teams make it each year. And then not to mention that, if you're looking at this AFC with Patrick Mahomes, Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson, you can probably bet they're not going to be down for long, right? And it doesn't mean that the Broncos can't compete with those teams and can't continue to win and challenge for the AFC West and hopefully challenge for the number 1 seed. But you've got the bird in hand right now. That this is an opportunity with the number 1 seed, with the first round bye, with home field advantage. You could battle back and get that again next year. You could do it in 2027. I mean, there's other opportunities, but this opportunity is now, and you have it. And it's not a what if. It's not can we get back there a year from now? This is the opportunity in front of us. And I think the same way that Adam Troutman talked after winning the AFC West of like, if you look at that AFC West T-shirt after you win a Super Bowl, you love it. If you look at it after you've lost, you think of, hey, what could have been? And I think in the same vein, the number 1 seed is similar in that, hey, if you look back at this season after winning a Super Bowl, you're like, man, the number 1 seed is what got us there, right? And we talk about 2015 a lot, and we say, man, if the Patriots had not lost in Miami on that final weekend of the season, and the Broncos don't get home field, do they win the Super Bowl? And you obviously can't prove it one way or another. It's part of what makes sports so fun is you can talk about things like that and have an opinion, but who knows if they go on and do that. And it could be the same thing this year. If you win the Super Bowl, you can point to home field advantage and that first round bye as being a critical element of it. If you don't go on and accomplish that ultimate goal, you'll look back at this season, and I still think, and I believe this, that winning the AFC West, getting the number 1 seed, it still makes this season, in my mind, a success, and you've taken a huge step this year. But again, because it's never guaranteed that you'll be back, there will be a little bit of like, we weren't able to accomplish that third goal, and that's disappointing. And depending on where it ends, if it does end, it probably amplifies the level of that. And so to tie it back to your question, I think the guys will be locked in because they know that if you don't get to goal 3 and win the Super Bowl, then it hurts a little more because and we had it there where we just needed 2 wins to get to the Super Bowl, or we had that week off, or we had home field advantage. I think they realize the opportunity that they have in front of them, that nothing is promised moving forward. And so that's why I'm confident in this team's focus. And just because, they've learned how to win at home. And I think that they know that the opportunity in front of them, they'll have that chance again. And you can't ever guarantee wins in the postseason, but I would feel confident that when you're playing any of these teams at home, you're at least going to have a chance in the fourth quarter. And really that's all you can ask for, I think, in the postseason is give yourself a chance to go get a win. And the way that the Broncos have played in fourth quarters this year, you've got to like their chances.
Yeah, I cannot wait to see how the fans are for the divisional round. A lot of the guys are excited about it because that's going to be a different energy. We've talked about the way the playoffs just brings out the best in teams, the best in fan bases and everything. So it's going to be really exciting to watch. And it's really interesting that what you said, because looking back, I remember when the team picture was last season and head coach Sean Payton said that he told the team, you're going to want to keep this team picture, because you're going to want to keep it because it's something special. And I know that some certain guys are gone and things like that, but that is where it kind of all started, them really buying into what they were doing here. And you get key guys signed, and then we talked about that. When Jonathan Cooper got signed, we're like, this sends the message that if you work hard and you do what you need to do, you will be rewarded. You see that this year with, Zach Allen and all these other guys getting their deals, re-signing DJ Jones and bringing in these free agents, having the Broncos be the place that free agents want to come to. We've talked about that with, Hufanga talking about how Bo Nix was a big point of why he wanted to be here. Evan Ingram said, I went to go visit the Chargers, and then I came back here and signed here because I wanted to be a part of what's being built here. And he brought that up again in the locker room. He mentioned that it was part of the sales pitch of, we're just missing some pieces, and we want you to be a part of it. And he's like, and so to be here, he's like, I just have one word. It's a blessing. The fact that that was the idea offseason when I signed here to now being the number 1 seed for a chance to go to the Super Bowl. And he's like, that it is a blessing. And we'll get to the game in a second. But, you know, the Broncos were in their throwback uniforms, still undefeated in the throwbacks, if I just may throw that in there. That's why I went my, throwback for today. But when you look at yesterday's game, I think it was important that the defense really got those takeaways going. A lot of guys talked about that. Nick Bonito mentioned that it was a big emphasis. He joked and said, like, yeah, coach really didn't care about sacks anymore. He was like, we need to get takeaways. But how important was it for the defense to really get rolling in that sense, in that stat, knowing that the playoffs are right around the corner?
Yeah, that's the ultimate stat, right? And I still do think that as the playoffs roll around, you need to be good in the red zone, right? You need to be good on third down. And as we look at the end of season standings and kind of where things fell for this team, pulling it up right now, the Broncos end up number 2 in third down defense, just less than 1 percentage point behind the Seahawks, and number 1 in red zone defense. They reclaimed that spot over the Vikings. And so that matters, right? Like, say you're playing, and we'll just we've referenced Josh Allen a lot just because he's been in the postseason a lot. Yeah. And you play them in the playoffs last year. Maybe it's a rematch. Who knows how this all turns out, right? But can you hold Josh Allen and the Bills to field goals instead of touchdowns? On third down, can you make a key play that gets your defense off the field? And Vance Joseph said it last week. Those are like turnovers to some degree. And I think that's true, but there's nothing more like a turnover than an actual turnover. And the key to yesterday's turnover, and I think I said this on the analysis, is that they weren't just turnovers like on the Broncos end. Like, if you have a turnover on your end of the field that saves points, like Jaquan's interception against the Chiefs, that's huge. But it's also huge when you're on the other side of the field and it's in plus territory, and now a turnover basically guarantees points. The Broncos went backwards on that offensive series after the Bonito strip sack, but they still got points because of how close they were. And obviously, J-Mac's pick 6, like, he just took care of it himself and scored the touchdown. But we spent all last week talking about how this team has to be better from a takeaway perspective, a turnover margin perspective, even more importantly, if they want to go on that run in the postseason. And some guys said that Sean Payton showed videos in the team meeting of all their takeaways, and even kind of said, hey, let's forget takeaways. I want you to score on defense, kind of upped the challenge and made it a little bit more intense, and they responded the right way. But yesterday is more of what you're looking for. And even I thought you were close to the third takeaway. There was a fumble late in the game that got overturned into an incomplete pass. Otherwise, you have the most takeaways of the season. And it's kind of astounding that with 2 turnovers, you tie your season high in turnovers. A +2 turnover ratio was tied for your best of the year. They'd only gone +2 on one other occasion, which was against the Chargers in week 3. Other than that, I mean, just kind of scanning through this, you were only positive in the takeaway margin 5 times this season, 6 times this season. And so that really speaks to that. I think the talent of this team and the grit of this team, that you won 14 games despite that.
Yeah.
I mean, I think back to 2023 when the Broncos went on that 5-game win streak. They were remarkable in the turnover battle. I mean, they forced, I think, 5 turnovers in that win over KC. They go to Buffalo on Monday night, force 3, I think, turnovers at least. There was the J-Mac fumble. There was the Simmons pick. There was the I'm going to blank on his name, the corner who was here. He had an interception as well. So several interceptions there. Against the Packers, there was a big turnover. And that kind of fueled the wins. When you're winning without those turnovers, it's impressive. Now, if you can turn that on going into the postseason, that would really matter. And it was funny, even just from yesterday, the Broncos jumped up into a tie for 19th in turnover margin for the season. Their takeaway total, they ended up with tied for the 26th most takeaways. So, like yesterday, some of it's just luck to some degree. Like the fumble recoveries, you can force fumbles, but the Broncos hadn't recovered a fumble in a long time. And so that was the first – they recovered a fumble against the Chargers in week 3. That was the last time they recovered a fumble prior to yesterday. And so if that can get going and you can add it to a defense that yesterday allowed 35% of third down conversions, 0 of 2 in the red zone, that's championship defense. And for whatever reason, like obviously the Texans are playing incredible defense. They deserve all the credit they've gotten. But the buzz on the Broncos defense has kind of slowed a little bit. And so they can get those takeaways. And let's credit Bo Nix too, because even as things weren't going great offensively, he didn't put the ball in harm's way. Yep. And especially in a game like that where you could tell early, and Sean Payton said this after the game, you knew what type of game it was going to be. It was clear that especially if you pinned that team deep, they were unlikely to go on like an 80-yard drive and score. And you saw that just kind of the way it played out. The first 5 drives, I believe, the Broncos forced 4 punts and had the pick 6.
Yeah.
7 punts overall, 2 takeaways, 2 turnovers on downs. You could tell the game it was going to be. And so if Bo Nix kept the ball out of harm's way, which he did, you were going to feel good about your ability to win that football game. And sometimes in the postseason, if you're locked in one of these tight games against, say, the Chargers upset the Patriots and they come back here in 2 weeks, you know that's going to be a close game. Mm-hmm. You know that it's going to be just based on all 3 of those games against Harbaugh and Herbert the last 2 years have been 1-score games. They've all been close in the fourth quarter, and especially the last 2 that came in L.A., it's been down to the wire. And so can you avoid making the critical mistakes and putting yourself in a bad spot? That's just as important as the takeaways. But, yeah, I kind of had a feeling that with as much of an emphasis as it was, that yesterday was going to be a good day from that perspective. And one of the, I don't know how much there is to take away from a game against reserve players, but I do think that was one of them that, hey, they you could see Nick Bonito attacking Trey Lance's elbow, which Vance Joseph said they hadn't been doing a good enough job of. Like he swiped at that thing and the ball came out and you recover it. And so one of the things that stands out in terms of what matters moving forward is the fact they were able to finally generate a couple of takeaways.
Yeah, I think that was one of the biggest messages they had, and DJ Jones talked about it, and that they do it in practice every day. It's on their mind, and sometimes the ball doesn't go your way, but sometimes it does. And they've talked about it through the course of the season that turnovers tend to come in bunches, and that's exactly what they're able to do. So it was good to see guys almost getting picks and really kind of playing aggressive in that space. As you mentioned, getting the strip sack and then having the pick 6 was huge. And J-Mac said, we ran that. He's like, it's funny. We ran that exact same play in practice. And he's like, so the fact that it played out that way and I was able to take it back, he was like, as you mentioned, it's one thing to get turnovers. It's one thing to get turnovers and turn it into 6 points, turn it into the touchdown to really kind of push the game in that direction and give a spark.
And he said he messed it up in practice too,
yeah,
right?
He said, but that's why you practice, because practice makes perfect, so you're good in the game. And that's exactly, kids at home, that's exactly why you practice. But looking at the offense, and you mentioned the fact that Bo Nix took care of the ball and things like that, another thing they did was dominate the time of possession. And if there's one thing that we've really emphasized for the last few weeks is the importance of those long drives, obviously getting points at the end, but the long drives really matter to exhaust teams, especially in this altitude, and take advantage so you can drain out the clock as much as possible. And a big part of that came from the spark of Jaleel McLaughlin. He had a couple pretty good runs.
Yeah, you know, Jaleel, I thought, played well. I was trying to look it up. I think he was close to a career high, or definitely a season high, right, in terms of yardage. Pulling it up.
Yeah, he had a six attempts, 41 yards, as long as it was a 10-yard run yesterday's game.
Yeah, maybe I felt like he had more. How much did he finish with? He finished with
rushing.
40. There it is.
Yeah, 41 rushing. Yes.
I was looking at the long. Yeah, so he ends up with, including his 17-yard reception, he had 58 yards, which is a season high. And I think I was looking to see when the last time he had that sort of production. It certainly had been a little bit, I believe, last year. but it was good to see him get going. Obviously, RJ Harvey had a couple of good runs late. It was I think they said after the game, and maybe it was Bo, they brought some run pressures. It was tough sledding to some degree, but I also think it's back to knowing what you need to do. It's finding a way to win that matters. And the key for this Broncos offense, and we should mention that we haven't heard anything directly from Sean Payton, but the broadcast did reference Sean Payton mentioned J.K. Dobbins maybe could be nearing a return. We'll keep track of that. That would certainly be a boost to this offense. But I think all year, and really this is not unique to the Broncos, but like third down, red zone, third down, red zone, third down, red zone. And yesterday the Broncos were 0 of 3 in the red zone. A week ago against Kansas City, they were 2 of 4 in the red zone. And then on third down, this week they were 33% on third down. Much better last week, 61%. It is something that the Broncos will need to fix and be ready to go on in the playoffs, because certainly if you get 3 red zone opportunities in the playoffs, you've got to take advantage. Points are at a premium in the playoffs. I think to some degree it helps, and we can talk about this more when we get to the actual playoff preview and we know who this team is playing, but like I think something about the Broncos' gritty ability to like grind out wins and dominate time of possession and have these late drives, like if you're used to playing in 16 to 13 games instead of like, and maybe they'll score as many points, but like Jacksonville the last few weeks has played like 35-point games, 40-point games in the playoffs, where it feels like sometimes the refs swallow the whistle a little bit, let you play a little more physical.
Yeah.
Teams have a little bit extra juice. Like you see these 20 to 17 games, these 24 to 21 games. And so I kind of think I actually like how the Broncos offense translates to that sort of environment where it might not be perfect all the time, but they have this knack for making clutch plays. And I also don't want us to be prisoners of the moment, because despite the red zone struggles the last couple of weeks, the Broncos, if you look back to Green Bay, they were 4 of 4 in the red zone. They were 2 of 3 in the red zone against the Raiders. They were 3 of 5 in the red zone against the Commanders since the bye. So there's been good. And then you like kind of go back a few more weeks, 4 of 5 against the Giants and Cowboys. And from a third down percentage, if you look at some of the numbers since the bye, 46% against the Commanders, 58% against the Raiders, 36%, 35% against the Packers and Jags. Like there has been enough success this year that I feel confident that, and again, Sean Payton didn't say this. I don't know if he'll be asked about this later in the week. I suspect that there was, and I said this earlier, that there was an element of let's not give everything away against the Chargers. And maybe
because you might see them.
You might see the Chargers, but also like you might, whoever you see, and especially because also last week you played a relatively like against the Chiefs, it was time of possession. It was the way to win that game. I just wonder if there was an element of like, let's not show everything. And so I don't know. I'm just not at the point where I'm like panicking, because I've seen this offense deliver in enough big moments where it's
huge.
Like Bo Nix has the most game-winning drives in the NFL. He's delivered time and time again. The Broncos have the most one-score wins in NFL the most come-from-behind wins in NFL history. They finished tied for the most one-score wins in NFL history. I've seen it enough times that, who knows? You could have a bad day. You could get knocked off in the playoffs. That's how the postseason works.
Right.
But I've also seen enough good days from the Broncos, especially at home, and kind of tying it all back together. That's why this matters of the 1 seed, is you have that extra week where you get to rest, where you get to skip a game, and then you get to play 2 games in front of Broncos country. And everything I've seen for this team, I believe that they're up to that challenge to chase that third goal. And we all know what that third goal is. And you still got to go do it. But we're now, 5 weeks away, 4 weeks away from like, you could be a few weeks away from being in a really incredible spot. And Alex Singleton said it last night to me, like, let's go chase this. And like, we have an opportunity. And I like this quote, I'm going to pull it up real quick because it's worth sharing from Alex.
Verbatim.
And Sean Payton said, like, you can see the light. You can see it in front of you. You're getting closer. And you can see the light in a good way, not a scary way. Alex Singleton said, that's the goal. You want to be the 1 seed. We are the 1 seed. You can see the light. Then he said, let's go get the job done, win 3, and get to raise the Lombardi. And it's within their sights. I don't know if they can reach out and touch the trophy yet, but we're getting closer. And, man, what an exciting time to be in Broncos country.
You know, that quote resonates because Alumni Weekend, Super Bowl 50 came out. They honored them at halftime on the field. You know, when the guys came back out, they see it. You know, they see the love. They see what you can do and how you can cement yourself in Broncos history in a way that it's immortalized. You can't take it away. It is what it is. Numbers don't lie. Championships don't lie. It's there forever. And this team is special, and that's one of the things that they strive to be. And, you know, not only did they finish, as I mentioned earlier, 8-1 at home, but they now tie the franchise record for most wins in a season, which last happened in 1998.
When they won the Super Bowl.
When they won the – I mean, I wasn't going to say it, but you said it. So, yeah, when they won the Super Bowl. So, I mean, it's one of those things that this is a special season, and they know what's at stake. And the way that they play for each other, the way that they are excited to host this division round, the way that Broncos country is excited to be here for this divisional round. I mean, it's been a long time coming for this team, and we talked about it many, many podcasts about the little full circle moments that continue to kind of close out the season. And now the regular season is behind us. The Broncos did exactly what they needed to do to win the AFC West in a tough AFC West and clinch that number 1 seed in what turned out to be a very competitive AFC conference this year. And, I mean, you look around the league and there's plenty of teams that are past 10 wins that are in the wild card round, which is crazy to think.
Yeah, I mean, the Chargers are 11-6, and they're the 7 seed in the AFC. And I think you've seen it's different than years past where I think in previous years, and you could look back at the standings from different years, the wild card teams, some of them haven't always been teams that you look at and you're like, this team can win a Super Bowl. I think you look at a lot of these AFC teams and think these teams are good enough to go on a run. It's part of what makes it so exciting. It's part of what is going to make it a really tough test for Denver, but it also, again, it's what makes it so meaningful that they have this first round bye.
Yeah, the first round bye is crucial, and I am very excited that I can just be watching all these wild card games. Just, you know, waiting to see what magic comes out from the wild card. So the wild card weekend starts on Saturday, and it goes until Monday, which will be the Texans and Steelers game. So it'll be the last game of the wild card round. In the divisional round, it's unclear which day the Broncos will play just yet. I know after, if you guys were at the game, big graphic came on saying a number 1 seed, and that game could potentially be played either on the 17th or the 18th. But again, that all depends on the season and things like that. But we cannot wait for the division round. We can't wait to see Broncos country back at Empower Field at Mile High, and we appreciate you guys listening to another episode and celebrating Dub Day with us on Altitude Advantage here in the Broncos studio. Once again, I am your host and team reporter, Elisa Hernandez. Across the table is our lead writer, Aric DiLalla. And for all the latest from the big win and what is to come in the upcoming weeks, make sure you guys stay tuned on DenverBroncos.com.